So now just introducing our speaker today. Today we have Danielle Ralic. She's going to be talking to us about why we should care about clinical trials and how to stay in the loop. She's the founder and CEO of Ancora.ai, a health tech company that connects cancer patients and their care teams to clinical trials through an AI-powered platform. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and let her continue with the presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I'm very excited to be here and to share what we're doing. So it's going to be a bit of a whirlwind because AI is in it. I'd love to share a little bit about what the heck that means and what that is. I'm sure you can't avoid it these days. And about clinical trials and just, why they're important, some little teaser of what's in trials, and hopefully get some of your feedback as well on what you think about them. So I'll just give a quick intro to myself. So I'm joining you from Zurich, Switzerland, which is very strange, but life is an adventure. So that's where it ends, or it leads you to. But I'm originally from Boston. I studied information systems, and I spent my career building business intelligence solutions for hospitals, public health departments, and pharma companies in Boston, Los Angeles, and Zurich. And started Ancora.ai because I was incredibly frustrated with the pace of our innovation in the field of healthcare. And I personally had a situation where a family member was sick with cancer, and I knew about trials because of my work with pharma companies and hospitals, but they were not getting offered trials or even told about them. It was a breast cancer diagnosis, and I think any diagnosis, it's important to look at trials as well. And I just saw the huge information gap that we have. So I'll give a little bit of history, a little bit of background. I've tried to prepare some interesting facts, so hopefully at least we'll all learn something new today. And then really excited to get your feedback. So thanks again for taking the time to meet me today. So I'll start with just a little bit of background on clinical trials for those who don't know. So clinical trials are this step, a very important step in our process of getting new therapies, which can be drugs, new surgeries, devices, or any other type of support measures to kind of the wider public. So we have to generate the evidence to say, this is safe, it works better than what we have, and it's interesting. So we're okay to now kind of give this out to the broader public. It's one of those processes in pharma and or in drug development that's abysmally horrible. And we've been doing the same thing in terms of how we recruit and set up these trials for decades. And I'm hoping, and also with your help, that we can maybe push the system to think a little different and hopefully progress with the times. So I'll get in a little bit of that, but why they're really interesting. So, I mean, the main part, of course, is that there are these treatment trials, and the way we're researching diseases, it's going so fast. And really, if you're thinking about what about all of your options, trials are an option. And so I always like to look at them kind of at every point in a treatment journey and see what's being investigated. So one, just to see what's going on, because it might be approved sooner than later. So it's interesting to see what people are looking into. What are the new types of therapies? You might have heard of nuclear medicine. I'll give a little bit of a teaser there, or radioligand therapy. Then there's antibody drug conjugates coming out. So it's really interesting to see what we're evaluating, what we're seeing some success in. And then the supportive care, there's also really interesting kinds of trials in terms of could be personalized nutrition or exercise programs that are available. And a lot of those are also what we call decentralized, or you're able to participate just with your phone or from at home in your computer. So it makes them really interesting things to dabble and see if some of those support can help. And then preventative, of course, is a bit more on the earlier side, but a lot of things in terms of screening. So there are actually some on the prostate cancer side as well. So I just highlighted a few that I noticed were happening in Canada. So we can see examples of PET scans, which are more on the diagnosis side, and combining that with the treatment. And then separately, there's websites being deployed, which they're looking for feedback and help on. And they're actually looking at also earlier detection or kind of risk assessment for prostate cancer, looking at men who carry the BRCA gene. So really interesting things that people are looking into. So I would say if nothing else, it's great to be on top of trials just to see what's the latest. And of course, we need everyone to help move these forward. Just a little bit kind of just on the background of what are trials, kind of how to think about them. So there's the goal, and you'll see in the title usually what they're trying to evaluate, and to what end and for what kind of group of people. And the most important part are these kind of phases, and this will help guide you more on the treatment side. But I have the official terms and then kind of how I like to describe it. But phase 1 is on the earlier side. So these drugs have to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And so phase 1 is really where it's the first time that we're testing this with people. So before that, we've done tests in the lab, usually animal studies as well. So really, it's such an early phase. It's very limited in terms of the number of people that they let on these trials. But really, they're testing, is it safe? And they'll usually test a bit of dosage, so kind of how much makes sense to give people. This is I'd say the riskiest part, but it does also offer usually the most innovative therapies as well. And risk is a bit of a difficult term to use because of what I'll share in nuclear medicine in a bit, but it's changing in terms of how we're understanding cancer and its biology and how we can treat it. So things are always in motion, I guess is one way to summarize. Then the second part is, so we'll see how well does it work. So it will really look at, can we improve outcomes? And the next one is comparing that to standard of care. So that's when you might hear the word placebo, but I'll just also say for cancer, it's unethical to not treat someone. So if you see placebo, it'll be the standard of care. So it's not that a cancer patient will not get care. It's just that they're going to be testing it with what someone would normally get to see, do we really see improvement? So if we're going to be approving this, is it because it's going to help us in some ways? And then the last one, these are usually very long-term studies. They're looking for a few years just to help monitor and just see, are there any unknown side effects that we didn't know? Because a lot of these earlier phases, they'll run them for a year, 2 years. So the phase 4 is really a long-term study, just looking at are things popping up that we didn't see earlier on. And they're usually, I'd say the phase 1 and phase 2 are more visits are usually required to go to the site. And then they do a lot of checkups just to make sure everything is working. And the phase 4s are a bit more hands-off, so it might be just quarterly visits or annual check-ins. So that's kind of the key. So if you're looking through trials on your own, that might help just kind of guide you of how early these treatments are. And the other piece is the eligibility criteria. So this is the one where they're looking and they're saying, these are the kind of people that we're targeting because we think it'll work with this group. And then these are the things that if someone has any of these attributes or prior therapies, that we don't think it's safe for this group or that it'll work. So the eligibility criteria is in a way just trying to sort out what's the ideal candidates, and then what are things that people might have that they should not join this trial. So it's very important to look at eligibility criteria. That drives a lot of the decisions in terms of what makes sense. So I'll just note kind of those pieces because I'll reflect on that as we get through the tool and some questions there. But the only other thing I'll note is that we're kind of funny about how we prove things. So if something, usually the approvals go for big cancers, so like a breast and lung, and then they'll start to go for less prevalent cancers and try to get additional approvals and see that drug works in other kind of indications in cancer. So you also might find in clinical trials a drug that's approved for another cancer, but now being tested in prostate cancer. So you might see some of that as well. Okay. We'll get into, I'm going to shamelessly plug nuclear medicine or use this as my example for what's new, mostly because I have the great fortune of working with ICPO and SNMMI and Josh Mailman, who's an amazing advocate for nuclear medicine. But I'll offer SNMMI as a fantastic resource. They have a lot of educational materials if you'd like to get into it. And I'll highlight this as just one of the things to maybe keep your eye on or check out in clinical trials because it's really fascinating. So basically, it is kind of what it sounds like. So it's had some bad press because nuclear isn't always the most positive word to hear, but essentially we're putting kind of nuclear payloads on a cellular level and bringing them right to cancer cells. And so that's kind of where the name nuclear medicine, but it's if we can find out how we can get to cancer cells, can we deliver something that would destroy them? And so I brought up this example of with PSMA and lutetium because it's actually in the indication of prostate cancer, but they found that PSMA is a protein that prostate cancer cells express. And so it's a marker where kind of, if you see this, they know that's very likely a cancer cell. And so we're comfortable with sending this kind of radioactive payload to this cell to destroy it. And so they call it kind of targeted therapy in a way because it's not just a general chemo or radiation where we're just kind of radiating and hoping for, that it'll at least take care of all the bad cells or the cancer cells. It's a really interesting approach where it's really trying to go straight to the cancer cells and limit this radiation or limit this payload to only cancer cells. And what's really interesting about this and why I wanted to use this example is because they're using it in two ways. So they're using it on the diagnosis side or imaging. So they're using it in PET scans. You'll see the words PSMA PET or FDG PET. And it's a way to look at where the cancer is. And I think that's really interesting. And then they're coupling that with the radiopharmaceutical therapy or this kind of nuclear medicine aspect. And so it's if we can see that the proteins exist or it's expressing what we're looking for, then we know we can go ahead and deliver kind of the radiopharmaceutical or this radioligand therapy to those cells. So if you've seen some presentations from nuclear medicine oncologists or researchers, they're saying for the first time, we can treat what we see. So it's a really interesting concept. Of course, it's fairly early. This one, Pluvicto, is approved, and maybe someone already has experience with it. There's another approval, I think it's Sofigo for bone mets as well. But I wanted to highlight this just to show some of the things that are happening in trials that are really interesting to see, what we're exploring, what we're learning, and what's being developed. So I highly encourage you to check out SNMMI or ICPO to learn more. And I'll jump into a bit about what we're doing. So I'd love to, share that and get your thoughts. But essentially, since my background was in building business intelligence solutions, I was for my company, I was our lead for building natural language processing models, which is a form of artificial intelligence that basically takes advantage of what we know with linguistics and uses that to help us understand text and kind of extract the meaning from text. And with clinical trials, what I had found was I was going through clinicaltrials.gov and other databases, writing them down or putting them in Excel and trying to keep everything organized. And I thought, gosh, there's really got to be a better way. And this was 2017. And the only thing was the models were quite early back then. So a lot of people told me that it wasn't possible. Thankfully, they were around. And also, thankfully, AI has greatly progressed over the years. So we were able to launch this platform in 2020, and the idea was we use technology just to help go through all of this information that's out there in clinical trials, to just help narrow down the work. And I'll be really careful to say tech can't do everything, and tech is not perfect. And if anyone tells you that, they are lying to you. But tech can do some good things, and it can help us kind of organize information. And we wanted to see if we could do that, if we could help more people find these trial information on their own and help physicians find this information and nurses. So that way it's just, if it's more accessible, can it be more top of mind? Can it really be an option all the time as we're looking at treatment planning or anything else? And we built it with working with a lot of patients, I think over 200 patients and over 150 oncologists across the US and Europe. So happy to talk about that process. And then, life is strange, so I'm joining you from Zurich, Switzerland, but our team is in Croatia as well. So in case you'd like to visit either of those locations or find yourself in Europe, please let me know. I'll love to take you for coffee or a glass of wine. The wine's better in Croatia than the coffee. Then the next part I just wanted to share a little bit is kind of why are we here? Why is this problem happening? And it's so fascinating. There's this paper about how we are exponentially increasing medical knowledge, which is fantastic in a way that we're learning so much faster than we've ever learned before. So in 1950, it would take 50 years for the amount of medical knowledge to double. And then you kind of fast forward and you get to 1980, and it only took 7 years for medical knowledge to double, which is wild. And if you kind of keep going on this timeline, in 2020, it was 0.2 years that medical knowledge is doubling. And why I bring this up is because this is one of the main drivers of why we're really struggling with clinical trials. And I would broaden that to general kind of medical information, but we're moving so fast in terms of what we're learning, and it's really hard to keep up. And it's hard to keep up for us as patients, as caregivers, but also as doctors and nurses. And there's some fantastic research done by an organization called Doximity, where they interview docs, and they interviewed oncologists and said, "Are you interested in trials?" And 80% of them said, "Yes, very interested." And then at the same time, I think it was 80% said, "Yes, but we are totally overwhelmed." And I mean, I think we all probably have seen this. If you go online, there's so much information. And this is also happening specifically in trials in terms of that volume and that growth. So I just pulled some data from clinicaltrials.gov looking at when trials were first registered in 2010. And we've seen 3.8 times trials since then, so about 14 years ago. And the other thing, so while we see more and more trials coming on, which is again fantastic because we're learning more, we're being more precise as well. This concept of precision medicine or very targeted therapies means that the trials or what we're looking for are now getting more and more complex. So as an example, before you used to just look for a trial, you'd say, "Oh, I'm looking for prostate cancer patients." But now you want to know, is it metastatic? Is it castrate resistant? And all of these things, because we can be so targeted in how we treat cancer and what we're looking for. And so this is the concept of precision, where we're understanding some of the underlying drivers, and we're really trying to get to those drivers to kill cancer cells or slow it down. And so while that's also fantastic, the problem is that it gets more and more complex in terms of that criteria that I mentioned, that eligibility criteria, kind of who are we looking for and what people shouldn't be on this kind of trial. So that's become more and more complex. And then the problem is that you read through things like this text on the left as a physician, as a patient, as a loved one. And I mean, I've heard from oncologists that if it's outside of their type of cancer, it can take them 3 to 4 days to look for one patient. And if you think of how much free time oncologists have in general, it's not a lot. And so how many people are going to have the 3 to 4 days to help look for trials? And I think that's why we need tech to jump in and really help support these oncologists and nurses, and also just us as well, looking for information and to help be kind of shared decision makers and shared partners. And so really this was where we looked at, so how do you use tech right? Which is, I am a big supporter of this, but it's not just enough to use tech. We have to, there's this concept of responsible tech or ethical tech, and it's how do you build these AI models? How do you build it in a way that actually helps and doesn't inherit bias from before, and is really going to help us be better in terms of our treatment decisions than we were before? And so one of the things we wanted to tackle was this trial navigation aspect, where there's kind of 3 parts, and each part of these has their own problem. And yeah, if we have time, I'll definitely get into it, but it'll raise all our blood pressure, I think. But I'll just say that the 3 pieces we were looking at was, how do you just find what's out there? The second one is looking at what's maybe interesting for me. And the third part is, how do I actually now get to that trial? And they all bring their challenges, but when we've interviewed patients and even asked doctors, actually, most people said they'll go to clinicaltrials.gov. Physicians said they'll ask their peers, or they'll remember something from a conference. The second piece is which one's right for me. This we've heard from patients. It's through patient support groups usually. And how do I get to that trial? This is where there is the greatest blocking point. And it's like pushing a rock uphill on mud with raining while it's raining on you. So those are the 3 things that we were looking at. So I'll tease up what kind of how we thought about it, what we built, and then I'd love to share what it means. And I'm sorry for anyone who will be super bored by the tech explanation. Like I said, maybe we'll learn something about AI today. which is always helpful because it's definitely here to stay. But we looked at, can we build a tech from the perspective of, I want to find trials that fit my situation, and how do we just help narrow down those options? Again, it's never going to say this is right for you. It's not a medical recommendation. It's not pointing you to the answer. It's just to help kind of search through this information in an easier way. And we wanted it to be based on kind of data-driven matching or eligibility criteria matching. So based on what they're looking for in that criteria or what they're not looking for, and really making sure we have the latest data. So we now have clinicaltrials.gov data. We've just plugged in ISRCTN from the UK because we work with prostate cancer research, UK and their oncologists. So we've put that in together. And in Switzerland, there's a group called SAKK, and I'm sorry, my German is horrible, but it's something like Schreiberis Krebsliga team that basically has their own trials that we pull from them as well. It's fully compliant with GDPR and HIPAA. We actually don't ask for any information unless you need help with getting to a trial. And we've been looking at the stats just to see how long it takes people to go through the questionnaire and get there. And it's been amazing to see that the average time is about 5 minutes to get to the end of the questionnaire and find some trial options. We also look at this. We work with hospitals as well, and happy to share more about that for whoever's interested. But on the hospital side, we also look at that timing because they told us if it took longer than 60 seconds, they weren't interested. So we really had a tough job of how to go through lots of information in 60 seconds, but thankfully we were able to achieve that. So I'll walk through the high level stuff, and then we'll take a look at the app together, and I'll share some of the data or the tech piece. But we thought about, okay, so one, how do we just pull in all the relevant trials so that way we at least start with the whole universe? And what's interesting about that is that precision medicine concept I mentioned earlier, where it's actually been changing how we think about cancer. So it's not always that we're looking just for prostate cancer or breast cancer or lung cancer. We now have this concept of basket trials or pan tumor trials or solid tumor trials, where we're actually just saying it just has to be a solid tumor, but it has to have certain genetic mutations. And this is kind of a trend that we're seeing as well. So we have a harder job to do on the data side to pull in, okay, then what are really the relevant trials, knowing that it might not be spelled out in terms of in the trial registries. And then the second part, how do we use tech to help us just go through and sift through this information to see kind of what are really the options for me? And the last part is how can we help actually get to these trials? So the discover part, I'll actually show you just kind of how it works looking at the data. And so I'll skip this piece for now, but and the decide and connect. So I'll just show you what this looks like in real life. So let me just switch screens quickly and hopefully nothing breaks. I try to prep for this. Okay, no, I think that's gonna work. Okay. Fantastic. So I'll show you. So one kind of our starting point. So just so you're clear on how it works, because I think it's really important to know how tech works, and especially when you're thinking of what you can trust and what you can't. So I'll just put, we can do Toronto for now, and we'll start with kind of the universe of trials. So typically, if you're a doctor or if you're looking for registries, clinicaltrials.gov is one of the big ones, and it's in English, which helps as well. And this is where you'll start to see all these trials listed out. So you can look at, or there are many different things to explore. It's just, you'll have to read through each one of these to see what makes sense. And that can be challenging. So I'll just kind of give a mix here. We can see there's a little bit on surgery techniques. Then we can see there's some on actual kind of interventions in terms of therapies. So I'll click on one and I'll explain kind of how the tech works. So the thing is, every morning we pull in all of the data that is new or has changed from the night before. And what we're looking at is extracting, and this is where natural language processing comes in, extracting key information about these trials that'll help us just organize this better. So a couple of things that we look at, and then I'll just say people putting data in here, copy paste. So we also have a wall of shame of trials that we found and competing conflicting information or just poor information. So if anyone ever wants a laugh, we have that and we are constantly adding to it. But The main part of the tech is looking at this eligibility criteria that I mentioned before. And I said linguistics, and I want to kind of go back to that real quick. But with linguistics, we can use parts of speech, so understanding what's a noun, an adverb, adjective, to help us find the right concepts and understand what they mean. So a couple of things that we do. So one is we have to understand what we're looking for or what is not going to allow someone to participate. So we have to be careful about inclusion and exclusion and keeping those separate. And then what belongs under each. So here we can see inclusion, and then we have these bullet points. We know bullet points are indentation, which mean it belongs to this kind of main sentence. And we look for things like, so this is a little bit, what I call subjective. So you'll see these, who deems someone suitable. I don't think that's a very hard criteria, so we ignore things like that. So something that's not hard yes or no. But we'll look for things like, okay, localized prostate. So we know, so we're looking for things like staging. So what stage of the disease are they looking for? And so we pick this up. And so because we know localized is describing the noun here of prostate cancer, we know these are related, and that we also know that this is a term for staging. And because it's in inclusion, this means if you have localized cancer, prostate cancer, then that's okay. But we also can inherit other things. So then if we know they're looking for people with localized prostate cancer, then we know that having metastatic prostate cancer will be a no-go. And so that's where we can inherit some of this kind of exclusion pieces. And then this one, unfortunately, doesn't have too much more to offer, to be honest. It's a lot of kind of general things, but I'll go to one more that maybe is just a few more pieces involved. Then the other pieces, so here they're describing the subtypes, so adenocarcinoma, so that can be interesting. If there's any requirements for prior therapies, that's also really interesting. And we look for them by mention of the molecule, the brand name, or the treatment class. So one of the things that's also behind it is what we call ontologies or hierarchies, where we can say, here's a treatment class, here's what belongs under that. So we can really look for these criteria at the lowest level or all the way up at the highest class as well. And we can see here they're looking for MCRPC progression. So that means they want people to have had therapies before. And then there's some things I'll just let you know also we ignore. So if we see, so radiotherapy would be something we pick up on because it's a prior therapy, but we ignore it because it has this very short time frame of we shouldn't have had it within 4 weeks of starting the study. It takes at least 4 weeks to get on the study, so we don't use this as a way to exclude trials because it's too short of a time frame. But all of this to say, we'll look up and down this eligibility criteria. We also check information against what they've mentioned in the study overview, in the conditions, and then they also include this really fun terms at the end where it can have great things and bad things. This one seems relatively okay. And so all of that, we have a weighted ranking system to really at the end do this final check. Did we find stuff that really makes sense? And how does that look? And then I'll mention that last, I said, getting someone to a trial. The reason why it's so challenging is because of this. So if anyone knows pharma companies, please help me put pressure on them that just saying that there is a research site is not actually very helpful information for anyone trying to get to the trials. I'm trying, we'll be publishing something with Tufts University soon on it, but the more people yelling, the better. And then I'll share just how it works with Encora. So I'll just refresh because it's been sitting for a bit, but basically, we support 17 types of cancer. We like to add them with patient groups and scientific experts. So if we're on our own, we can't do the best job. So that's always important to us. The next one will be Cancer of Primary, really fantastic advocacy group that works with us. But essentially, we're answering a bit on the diagnosis, a bit on prior therapies, and then kind of general status or general questions. And what's important to know is that the results here will go down if an exclusion criteria is met. So if I just go back, sorry, just to maybe the staging. So here, early stage, so that means that what is finding are trials appropriate for early stage. And when I'm going metastatic, it's filtering out trials that are looking for early stage. So it's only in the perspective, like a power of elimination, just process of elimination through this. If you don't know things, easily skip things. And then if you had therapies, this is where we're trying to collect some information on what might have been tried already. So I'll just answer a few things. We can say, yeah, castrate resistance, we've had some chemo. And then I can say, I'm not sure about the surgery that I had or radiotherapy. And this, we have to continuously evolve it. So it's not perfect, very, very aware, but we're going to keep adding and taking away things just based on what we're seeing evolve in this space and how people are being treated. So we'll be learning with the experts as they evolve it. And then essentially at the end of that, there's a list of trials. So I only answered a few things. So there's, if you answer more, of course, it can be matched better. But what I want to share is we support over 150 genetic mutations. So if anyone has had testing, this is a way to see if something is being evaluated for certain genetic mutations. So we can see here like ALK, ROS1. These are things that are being evaluated. I also mentioned nuclear medicine. So if you do want to stay on top of it, radiopharmaceuticals is the tag there that you can try and look for trials. Or if you want trials specific just to prostate cancer, then that's tumor specific. Or if it's mentioned as part of the basket trials, then that's the multiple tumor type. And then observational will be non kind of treatment types of trials. So it's already pre-filtered only from the lens of treatment. But these are the kind of filters that you can play around with. And there's 100, let's say, within Toronto. And I'll just expand that to 400 just to see what else is going on. But yeah, then you'll start to pick up US trials because of course the location wise. But this could just be interesting just to see what's happening. And then if I go back, now that I have a bit more trials coming through, I'll just go to radio pharmaceuticals. Yeah, we can see, a bit more with lutetium, different radioisotopes being evaluated. So this could be a great way. I mean, I use it to see what's going on, what's being put in trials. And if you want, you can export the results as an Excel file. We do need to make it better. I'm very aware. I'll work on that. And then this is where we have a little bit more information. We always have the source, so you can always see where we got this from. And if you want to go read through yourself, super encourage that to see, why we picked this up and make sure that it picked it up correctly. And then the part that I'll just highlight, so it's this put me in contact piece, where if it does look interesting, then this is where we'll ask someone to register because we'll need to correspond. But I'll just go through this. I've already logged in. But once it's in, then the team will get a ping about the request, and then we try to help figure out, does the trial really fit? So we'll do a first check, just make sure based on the responses that were given, based on the trial that was requested, to see that it fits at the high level. And then we pass that off to the trial. So then we'll go and reach out to the hospital or the oncologist, or sometimes the pharma company puts themselves in between, which is where I have many scars. And then we'll work to see the contact and if we can help get someone referred over. So I just wanted to share what that looks like. If things are interesting, I mean, I use it for myself. I like to bookmark trials, so I have them later so I can kind of explore what I was looking into. You can save searches, and then every week we send updates on that. I have some old trials, but just to give a sense, that's how it works. You can answer as many or as little questions as you want. And really, we're just hoping it's a way to just explore trials, see what's out there, and hopefully a relatively easy manner or easier manner. And we're going to continuously be updating it. Like I said, it's just everything's evolving so fast, so we're trying to stay on top of that. So hopefully I've given some tips of how to use it in terms of filters as one part, or if you happen to remember the name of the study, or you're looking for certain keywords, this is another way to interact with it. So really think of it as just a search tool that can hopefully help find options. So that's the piece on the tool. And yeah, I'd love to get your feedback on that. So anyone who has opinions or ideas, I mean, I am absolutely here for you. So just let me know. And then I'll just quickly wrap up with some final pieces. So we looked at that. I wanted to share, we have an impact report. So we're looking at also how many people can use it, where are we reaching people. And it's amazing to see, I mentioned this less than 5-minute piece to find trials. We're supporting people in North America and Europe. It's about a 45-45 split and 10% rest of world. We look at also the staging. Can we help people think about trials and access trials earlier? We supported 147 people going to trials in the 12 months that we looked at in this report. And funny part was pharma told us patients didn't want to use it, and yeah, no one would care and things like that. So we introduced, it was one of the patients that we work with that gave us the idea to put the question in of, are you here today because you're looking to join a trial in the next 6 months? And 67% said yes, which was incredible. And we've used that to pharma to kind of wake them up a little bit on working with us and making this process better. And I mentioned just how we worked it, but I'll just highlight a few things. We did publish, we ran a study with a patient group earlier, I think it was 2021, and published the results of that at ASCO GI with Dr. Pashtun Kassi. So certainly welcome you to read that. We also work with American Cancer Society as part of their Blue Button project, which is more in a hospital setting. When we first launched it, no doctor wanted to touch AI. It was, I've studied medicine, I'm the expert, blah, blah. And then it was kind of funny with ChatGPT, everything changed. And so now doctors are very interested in AI and tech and the tools we can build. So it's been really, really a very welcome change. And I hope it's our opportunity to do better. And then I'll just mention that we are working with the hospitals. We also work with scientific research organizations, and we're trying to work with pharma to help them give us better data so we can make this process smoother. And with that, I know there was a question about the state in Canada. So I'll just give a high level. I'm not an expert on Canada, but we have some patient groups that have been helping us out there. But clinical trials in Canada are just a little bit behind as compared to other countries. And unfortunately, I think the two big things, if I were to really call them out, would be there's no kind of centralized infrastructure. So it takes a lot to run these trials. It takes personnel in the hospitals and these clinics that have the experience, that can be investigators, that can lead these trials. And also kind of this process of approving the trials so we can get them into the clinic. And there's some research done there that the processes aren't incredibly streamlined. And so that's kind of discouraging people who want to set things up. And that lack of infrastructure makes it a bit challenging. Of course, Canada's a huge geography. You have really a lot of distance between people and doctors. And so that's kind of another piece that they've been thinking about. And so when you hear the decentralized or hybrid participation, that's trying to see how do we think differently about trials where maybe we don't need someone coming in every week. Maybe they can do some parts of it local with their doctor and then come in once a month instead. So we're thinking of new ways, and I highly encourage you to be part of these conversations. They're looking for patients to help shape the future of how this looks. So definitely get involved. And the thing that, of course, stops everything and runs everything is the money part, where, of course, you need funding to run these trials. There's kind of these concepts of trials run by pharma, where, of course, they'll be the ones bringing in the money that'll help, hospitals kind of fund these studies. And then there's when doctors would like to run a trial on their own. And that is one of the funding challenges is there enough kind of funding in Canada for investigator initiated or kind of doctor initiated trials? And that's been one of the challenges. There have been recent initiatives. I cannot say how successful they are, so I'll just list them. And then again, I highly encourage everyone to get involved. But they are trying to make this kind of national infrastructure to help make it easier for companies to bring their trials to Canada and to launch them faster. Faster means less money usually, and also faster to market. They are working on setting aside funding to help these investigator trials, as well as academic institutions or hospitals and pharma even, to fund more of this process. If money makes the world, or runs the world, unfortunately. And the other fantastic piece is they are working on these initiatives where they're really formalizing, including patients to build out trials, think about trials. They help reflect on the protocols. They said they're open to any feedback, so I put their email here. I haven't tested it, so I'm not sure who will respond, but I'll let you know there is an email and allegedly interest. So these were the initiatives that I've seen. I think that's why if you do look at trials in the US will usually have the most options. I mean, it has the biggest population, it has a ton of money. So you'll certainly see things there, and then maybe they'll come to Canada. I've also seen a lot of good pressure from patient groups saying, we want this trial here. And that pressure has actually helped bring over trials. So I'll say all that to end with kind of our experiences. And the part that we've really noticed is doctors and nurses are really struggling to keep up with trials. I mean, and I would say even standard of care because of how fast that's changing. They've told us, we've heard many things. I'll just say the time aspect is a huge part. The other thing is trials are usually kind of outside of their normal work. So again, they don't really have that time allocated. And I'd say also no real support structure, incentives to help them. Pharma companies haven't really thought about how to get patients to trials. And this is where I am fighting them every minute of the day, I think, trying to get them to think differently, trying to get more support for this referral process and the hospitals. I mean, we recently had a hospital say they're open for the patient. We went through the screener, it made sense, and then asked the person to fax their records. I was like, I'm so sorry, but I don't think this person has a fax machine. I was like, I haven't had a fax machine in 20 years. So can we think a little different? you know, and it's these processes from decades ago that we need to challenge and we need to do things differently. And so that's part I fight a lot about. But the beautiful thing is there's more and more conversations happening about trials, more and more patients talking about them, patient advocacy groups, and it's making this pressure. And I will say, like, patients are making all the difference. It has been everything that I've seen come through has been from patients pushing things forward. And I'll just give one example, but there's one hospital in the UK where patients in the waiting room were talking to each other and sharing their experiences, and no one had heard about trials in their cancer department. And basically they put pressure on the hospital and said, look, trials are really important. No one's talked to us about it. What's happening? And the doctors admitted, like, look, we just don't have the support. We don't have the time. And they said, okay, well, we'll bring a tool in. And so they brought us in, and the doctors are blown away. They had no clue that they could use technology like that technology like that existed. And now it's a mandate for them when they prepare for their tumor board discussions that they always look at trials when they're thinking about what are the possible courses of action. And so now they're doing this routinely with their patients. So everything that I've seen in terms of change in clinical research with pharma or with hospitals has been because patients have been pushing it. So I just want to say, like, it's absolutely beautiful to see. I mean, thank you to everyone who's adding their voice and opinion. It really takes a village to move things forward, and it's moving slow, but it's moving. And so with that, just want to thank you for giving me this forum to learn more about trials, maybe a little bit about AI. And if anyone has any questions or feedback, even outside of the session, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're learning, we're co-creating, we're developing this further. Everything is changing so fast. So we're always looking to learn, and would love any ideas that you have, any feedback. And thank you once more.
Thank you, Danielle. That was a great presentation, and I'm sure everybody really appreciated it. Very detailed. So yeah, we'll move into the Q&A now.